my Skype phone number up here so I can take calls. This is my first time doing the program from my new place here, so I'm just still shaking out some of the bugs, as it were. Let's see. There we go. Living in the city of Boston, you know. All right. Yeah, there we go. All right. John Gist is with me, regular guest. He's an author, he's a writer, he's hosts occasional podcasts. John, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, and congrats on the new digs.
Thank you. So you've written an interesting article here, your latest, in your official blog, Creative Conservative Consulting, called Writing Truth in a Mad World. And I think that you get into some of the most influential current philosophers, including Foucault and Nietzsche. And I'd like to just unravel a bit their influence, given your comment, which I think is quite prescient, that they glorify the use of language and the use of words as a vehicle of power.
Yeah, and this will actually, that's a great. I told you I've read your book, The Satanic Conspiracy.
Thank you.
And we're going to merge. This merges right into it. I was going to talk about that, and I wrote another article a while back called "The New Gnosticism," and in your book, what you call the New Age, I call. I'm just using a different terminology for the same thing, the New Gnostics. And as we most people are aware anyway, the Gnostics go back all the way sort of to the beginning of the civilization, and that they sort of want to overthrow things and control everything themselves. And with the advent of so this isn't new, but it really took off in the 20th century big time. It really took off in the 20th century. It's not new. It's been around. The Catholic Church, there were all kinds of Gnostic heresies that were battled and put down. It goes underground for a while. It reemerges. And in the 20th century, it emerged big time. And I like to pin it somewhat, although I grudgingly respect, I want everybody to be clear on this. I grudgingly respect Nietzsche in the sense that he's dangerous and he was prescient on a number of levels. But he's really the one, sort of the linchpin of Foucault, and everything that comes after. They're building off of Nietzsche in one way or another. They're kind of building off of Nietzsche in the fact that sort of like the famous quote from Nietzsche that everybody may have heard is "God is dead, right. God remains dead, and we have killed him." And it goes on to say, "How can we deal with this, the murderer of all murderers? What was once great and holy is now gone. What new holy things will we do?" And at the end of that quote, he sort of says, the only thing we can do is to make gods out of ourselves. And in this sort of weird, and it just bespeaks the weird times we live in. And of course, in the New Testament and John, we have the Word is God, and the Word made flesh is Christ. So the word logos goes back to ancient Greece, and it's sort of the underlying principle of the whole universe that holds it together. But men now, with Nietzsche coming in, said we must be gods, basically. We create truth. We don't participate in truth. We create it in our own heads. Let's just sort of overlook all the logical fallacies that go along with that and say that it took root because it appeals to people's egos big time, especially young people. Nietzsche's a romantic writer, and he can grab you. He can really grab you. He grabbed me when I was in high school and ruined my life for like 20 years. I was like under the influence. Mm-hmm. But once you get a little older, you go, well, that doesn't make any sense, because really he's creating a prison. That means we're all prisoners in our own minds, and my truth cancels your truth out. Your truth cancels hers out. Hers cancels his out, and ad nauseum to the end of the world. So there is no truth under Nietzsche's scheme. Nevertheless, these Foucault, and you can go Derrida, all these, and his deconstruction, they begin with the premise that Nietzsche sort of promulgates. There is no absolute truth. There are no absolutes. Everything is actually relative. And so there is
whatever you want it to be, because if you're God, you can create your own truths. And for someone to question your right to do that, that gets into the issue of prejudice, that somehow you're a bigot if you question someone else's truths, and that becomes the cardinal sin. But you're talking about Gnosticism, which of course is an ancient movement. It's the ancient mysteries of Babylon, if you will, and that it did, it struggled within Christianity from the early centuries. There's been Gnostic movements, and that you claim that the Gnostic movement has become big time. It's become dominant in today's culture. So let's just bear down a little bit on what Gnosticism is. I mean, I always thought conventionally that it deals with the mysteries, the esoteric side of examination, which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing if it is channeled properly as a way to understand the glories of God. But it gets into problematic areas when you have the locus become the individual as supreme, and that the individual replaces God, which of course is the sin of the Garden of Eden.
Exactly. So Gnosticism, basically, out of the Greek, it sort of translates into something like a secret knowledge. It's a secret knowledge that only a few are capable of achieving.
Right.
And so St. Augustine is big time against this. He's going, no, Christianity has to be for everybody, or it's for nobody at all. But the Gnostics said, well, no, it's certain people by certain actions and by certain rituals. Think of Aleister Crowley and all these guys in the 20th century. By certain rituals, we'll have access to the divine. The rest of the peons will have to come to us, and because we have this secret knowledge that we can't really share with you because it's a secret, and you'll have to do what we say, basically. And
because we're enlightened, and because we're the elect, and because we are operating, and I think many of them convince themselves of this deception, that they somehow are superior in terms of understanding what's best for all of humanity. And it also has lent itself to secret societies over time, because it has to be conducted in secret, as if this elect goes up various degrees, not to single out Masonry, but that can be part of it. And that within these secret societies, you can develop this elect that can have kind of an informal control over everything, over the world, and feel entitled to do that, whether they're having holocausts, or whether they're having, pandemics, or whether they're having a great reset, or whatever it is they're pushing at any given time. They view this as all for the better, for the common good. I mean, they're in a sense, they're corrupting actually a Catholic principle of the common social good by removing God, and by saying we are the arbiters, we're the avatars, if you will, of this so-called common good in their hands.
And I would, one of my favorite quotes, and I'm a big admirer of Solzhenitsyn, and when he was talking about communism, he was vehement against it as a hatred against God. That is the core of communism. And I would suggest that the new Gnostics, although they claim to have access to divine secrets and things like this, divinity, they know that they don't, because they don't believe in anything. It's like in your book, you suggest even the secret is a lie. It's just something used to have power over others.
Right.
And back to the Nietzsche quote, I think it's innate in human beings somehow that we want to. There's a rebellion against the idea of a sovereign God. And this rabid individualism of Nietzsche that isolates the individual from the community is contrary to Catholic teachings as well. I think of Duns Scotus, the medieval philosopher, who comes up with this idea of thisness. So he's pro-individual big time. I mean, everybody's absolutely unique. And that's a testament to God's infinite creativity and infinite freedom. And so everybody should be celebrated as a unique individual, not just people, but everything that in creation has that touch of uniqueness, because God is infinitely creative and infinitely free to create as he pleases. But his individuality is a completely different ilk than Nietzsche's, because all the individuals not on this is he's a Franciscan, so they have a kind of a different theology on things. They think that basically Christ didn't come to save the world was made for Christ, so everything's on this trajectory towards Christ. And so everything is, since it's headed in that direction, all creation is on a pilgrimage together. We're all on the same journey together as individuals under this sovereignty of God. And so that's radically different than saying that I am God. as in the 20th century, where they really pulled out all the stops. If you've ever tried to read Derrida, which I'm sure you have, and you can see this with Jean-Paul Sartre too. I like to pick on the French existentialists because they play with language in such a way that if you're pretty adept at reading, you understand that they're not really saying anything at all. At what it adds up, it sounds the jargon and the playing with words and the mirrors and smoke and mirrors that they use. It sounds like it's highly intelligent, very deep, complex. And this is a sign of Gnosticism too. When things get so obscure and so in the weeds that only they can understand what they're saying, and they understand that they're not really saying anything, I think at the end of the day.
Well, it's sophistic language. It comes from the ancient Greek sophists, which were the world's first lawyers, if you will. And that comes from the world's first liars, not the lawyers lie, but you know what I mean. That, they were able to jumble and disseminate words in a way that would create a new reality that could either help or hurt their client or their opponent. And that they developed this kind of code language that really had double meanings. And yeah, I mean, maybe some people say it's Masonic type language, but the point is that there's a lot of code in there. There's a lot of double talk. There's a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo, as the Masons call it. There's a lot of, it's kind of like they're looking down at you and using this code that serves both the double purpose of them communicating with each other and them talking down to you as if you somehow, by not understanding this, are not as smart as they are. You're not one of the elect. So you walk away from this experience, whether you attend a speech which one of them delivers or read something, thinking, oh, this is so brilliant. I can't believe this. It's like, and yet not really understanding what it is, and that in and of itself is part of what makes it brilliant. The more difficult it is to understand, you assume the smarter this must be, when in fact there's actually less there than meets the eye. And in terms of politics, this was one of the reasons why Donald Trump was such a threat to this sophistic, illuminated establishment with their double talk, because he spoke plainly, he spoke crudely, he could be very rude and he could be very cruel, but we knew what that was, as opposed to the stab in the back, without any, all done through smoke and mirrors and surrogates. Trump did it himself. He'd get down there and he'd do the dirty work. And that appealed to people, after these centuries, or these decades anyway, of double talk. We wanted to have something which was basically true and basically functional, that had actually served the purpose. I mean, the reason we have language is so we can identify things, not obscure their identity. And that this idea of this sophistic world, which almost becomes a double universe, it's, I would argue, satanic, but certainly Gnostic, in that it deals with what we're talking about here, this new age. What about, I mean, the thought that I have recently, I had a conversation with someone about critical race theory, because I think that's the most current manifestation of the communist worldview and conspiracy. And it goes by different names. It's called communism, Gnosticism. I mean, it changes, it shapeshifts because it's made up. It's not, it's not something that's organic. It's something that's created by people with an interest. And, that what this is basically that they are telling, I mean, the tell on it is that they came out in their doctrines and said that the Brown versus Board of Education decision by the Supreme Court in 1954 was a form of white supremacy, because it helped Black people become part of the white supremacist world, and thus it was part of a conspiracy by white supremacists. That's the tell about what they're trying to do here. But the actual manifestation, the actual practice of it, is that they're telling young Black children in school that you shouldn't excel too much. You shouldn't become an intellectual and a self-actualized person, because if you do, you're basically acting white. You're part of the, right? You're part of the white supremacist. And they're telling young white children at school that you have to tamp down your ambitions, you have to slow down your creativity, your goals, because to do so, you're practicing white privilege. So what this is basically in the most blatant form, and this goes back to John Dewey and some of the so-called progressive educators. It is an outright dumbing down of people, of our children. It's telling our children that they must behave in a certain way that is subservient to what's natural, which is self-interest and the actualized person, the sovereign individual. Because if they do that, then they are involved in these terrible ways of being. You know, they're white supremacists, or they're white privilege beneficiaries. And I mean, to show how bizarre this is getting, I think this Los Angeles paper just did an article saying that Larry Elder,
I saw that,
candidate for governor, is a white supremacist. He's a man who grew up in a Black, basically in poverty, and a self-actualized person, and he's a white supremacist. He's Black. I mean, it shows how there's nothing to do with actual real life. This is this is Marxist theory, basically.
I think they might be getting a little bit of desperate when they start hurling. The past couple of days, I go up and down with this. So sometimes I get pretty depressed of all this. Sometimes I think it's funny, and sometimes I find hope in the absurdity of the situation. Because let me go back a little bit and touch on the sophists again. So Plato really did not like the sophists, because he said they weren't after what a philosopher has to be after. They have to be after truth, no matter what the cost is. And the sophists weren't. The sophists themselves say we can make the bad argument into the good argument, or the good argument into the bad argument. Mm-hmm. We can play with language any way we want, and you'll believe us because we're really good with language.
Skilled, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, with those skills. So come and pay us. Another thing that Socrates didn't like about him is they asked for pay. You got to pay us before we'll teach you how to lie. Basically,
it was professional liars.
Yes, yeah, it is.
That was, in a way, that would be mimicked in the 20th century by Sigmund Freud.
Yeah.
You have to come to have psychology because we need to make money. We need to turn it into a profession so we can get paid. And he spent most of his time in conference with other psychologists, including Jung, talking about how to make money, how to get paid. I mean, I think that I understand this is maybe an anecdote, but he had a patient who came to this wealthy man who said, I'm having a problem here because, he's a psychologist, because I'm having an affair with my patient. What should I do? And Freud said, you should divorce your wife, marry your patient, and get paid. Wealthy. I mean, it's sort of, it's kind of like it became very entrepreneurial. And I think that's what these sophists were doing. They were creating a profession.
Yeah, they were.
To support their endeavors. Let's just put it that way.
And it still exists today, and it's infiltrated each and all of our institutions. So now people don't know which way is up. But there's a price to pay for all this. By all accounts that I've read, after he wrote Civilization and its Discontents, Freud was known to be very depressed. He had a very pessimistic, dark outlook on humanity because he was cynical and he played that whole game. And really the recipe for all this stuff, critical race theory, I don't know why people buy critical race theory. I don't understand it on many levels, because basically it says you're a racist, period. There's nothing you can do about it. You can't do anything.
It's almost a biological theory. Somehow it's baked into who you are. And it's completely false, of course, but it serves a Marxist agenda.
Well, it's a loaded question, right? If a CRT person comes up and asks you, Are you a racist? You're damned no matter which way you answer. If you say, no, I'm not a racist. I believe in Martin Luther King Jr. I judge each individual on their individual character. They'd go, nope, that proves you're a racist because you denied it. And if you say, well, yeah, you're right, I'm a racist, they say, well, you got to give us some money then, basically. You've got to do what we
Absolve yourself. Yeah, it's like you got to give an emolument. It's kind of almost reminds me of the Salem witch trials. When they would put someone on trial, they say, if you said you were not a witch, you'd get dropped in the river, thrown around your neck to prove. And if you survived that, then you were right. But if you said you were a witch, then you'd be outright stoned.
Yeah. I mean, it's a loaded question. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And there is some pushback going on now, and I hope more people are taking heed of approach these school boards and everything else, and battling this. But it's even more than that. You can get. I was very happy to read your book, and I recommend it to all your listeners too, because it makes people like me. I just resigned my position from the university because I could not stand the hypocrisy any longer. And it makes me feel like, there's other people that out here, I'm not just some conspiracy theorist, but with these mask mandates and everything I saw this kid go into the bank the other day, maybe 5 years old, with a mask on her face, and they're where I am, they're making kids wear masks all day long in school. How can you learn how to read or anything if the teacher's got a mask on? And facial recognition skills and all this it just seems like with CRT, it's a actually concerted attempt to promote mediocrity at best. And maybe
it's very oppressive. It's like the burqa.
It is. It
cover your face. I mean, Americans, the way we communicate partially is we look at each other's faces. That is part of how Americans communicate. It's not just the verbal. You actually look at someone's expression, the way they conduct themselves. That's part of it. And to hide that it's dehumanizing. It is maybe deliberately meant to be. And also, look, I understand maybe I put the mask on if I'm in a crowded area, if I'm inside in a crowd, because I do think there's some merit to it. I mean, droplets, whatever, I don't want to catch anything. But you see, people are extreme about this. They're wearing it outside alone, or
I know
you put your finger inside, or if you move it in the wrong direction, I mean, they start freaking out. It's almost like a sacred object.
Jogging. I've seen people jogging down the street wearing a mask.
So they're gonna give themselves a heart. I mean, you don't get enough oxygen. It's like wearing it in the gym. It's not healthy. I mean, I think everybody would admit that.
It plays on. It's. I think that there's another, and these are deep-seated cynical ideas. I think of the Gnostics or the New Age, however you want to call them, is that playing on people's fears works. So you might as well use it. Some people are genuinely afraid that they're going to get COVID and it's going to kill them. There is a possibility that it might. But the possibility is so low. I mean,
it's also not there really with children, unless they're extremely obese or they've got a pre-existing condition, in which case, sure, you should probably homeschool. Under these conditions, I suppose. But, most children, I mean, it's less than 1% likely that they're going to catch it, let alone become extremely sick. And even with adults, if you're in good health, there are alternative ways to go about this. I can't really talk about that on YouTube because I've already been banned on one. I mean, I've been given a strike. You're not allowed to discuss anything other than the vaccine. And I'm not against the vaccine. I've had the vaccine. There's just I'm getting a note here from there. Okay, never mind. YouTube is sending me a note. No, I'm okay. My YouTube is heating up. It's a little bit hot in here, as you might have noticed.
Yeah.
I'm trying to regulate the temperature. And I don't want to turn on my little desk conditioner because it makes a buzz and I don't want to interfere with the sound, but maybe I will anyways. Okay. Just trying to adjust. I mean, it's this new place. It's actually pretty good because I've got my own place up in the attic, which is a finished attic, which is wonderful because now my family doesn't have to hear me yammering away. They generally don't agree with me on things, and it's just as well that I get a little bit more privacy.
The only
All right.
problem is the attic is the hottest room in the house.
It is hot, yeah, so I'm trying to figure out how to regulate things. We're having a huge heat wave here in Boston. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it's been hot here for months and months. It's just like one day blurs into the next.
Yeah, speaking of which, I hope this isn't too controversial for for me to mention this, but Vice President Kamala Harris in Singapore, halfway around the world, speaking to an audience, suggested that people buy their Christmas toys early. They buy them now because there may be a shortage around Christmas. And that she said the reason there may be a shortage is because of global warming. It says global warming is damaging ships' ability to go to port. It's damaging, transportation. And so we should get ready for shortages. Now, she's not all wrong. She might be wrong about the global warming piece, but she's not completely wrong about the shortages. I think it has to do with lockdowns internationally, and it has to do with transfer of wealth in the form of paying people not to work, that companies are not having enough employees, and companies are experiencing some shortages in different areas. I mean, McDonald's just made note that they're no longer going to be offering milkshakes because they don't have the ingredients, because there's been a shortage. And I've heard that companies are struggling to get certain supplies for certain things. And as far as employees go, people are leaving their jobs. And I think part of that has to do with the mandates on the vaccines. Now, again, I'm not criticizing the vaccine here. I mean, I will say I think it's a personal choice. But when they start with mandates, especially in the medical field, you get a lot of people who don't want to take the vaccine. Maybe they have their reasons, maybe they don't. But the fact is that apparently, from what I hear, a lot of people are leaving because of that. So there's going to be a shortage in that area. So there is some dislocation as a result of this.
It's a complex issue, but I live in a small town in New Mexico. It's on an interstate, but we don't have a lot of shopping around here. So if I go to the Walmart, there's the everything's gone. It has been for a while, and it does have to do with the lockdowns. I could guarantee that. And another thing is this it's a small town, it's rural, so didn't used to be a lot of work around here, but almost every store you go to has a help wanted sign on it. Almost every single store you go to. And now there's a threat of another, because the cases are surging. And I have to agree with you. I'll go on record and say I'm not against the vaccine. If people think they need to take the vaccine, they absolutely should go take it. They should hopefully reason through it, but it should be an individual choice. I get a little bit worried when the gigantic amounts of pressures that individuals are getting, and there's reasons. I mean, people should at least be allowed to weigh both sides of the equation before and make their own choice.
Right.
It's really affecting even the Catholic Church in America anyway. Some bishops are saying that. I just heard a bishop in Chicago mandated that all the priests and the employees of the church get vaccinated. I think it was a bishop in Colorado that said, no, I don't agree with that. I think it's an individual. I don't think there's a moment. Everybody has to weigh that for themselves, the ethical reasoning behind it and everything else. It should be a personal choice. I mean, and that's going on all over the place in the world of the bishop. So we live in a very confused time. And I think that it goes back to sort of get back on track with the sophistry and the new Gnostics and all this kind of stuff. People are confused. They really are. A lot of people are confused when we hear, for example, yesterday, Americans get to the Kabul airport as quickly as possible, or the day before. Today I wake up and I looking through the news, and it's whatever you do, don't go to the Kabul airport because it's going to be under attack. So and I think we can criticize Fauci hopefully a little bit, because he's flip-flopped so many times on so many things that what are you supposed to believe? People don't know who to believe anymore. They've lost trust in our institutions. We have lost trust, both sides of the aisle. Let's be honest here. No matter what side of the political divide you're on, or maybe you're in the middle, you've lost trust to a certain extent in your institutions because they don't make sense. And Trump did make sense, and some people liked that. But you're right, his personality was caustic. Sometimes I thought he was just joking when he was saying some of these things.
Oh, I thought he was hilarious.
I did too.
I know that some people, obviously establishment flipped out, and for reasons that actually are fairly deep, and it's probably a little bit beyond what we can talk about, they really felt they had to take Trump out. I don't want to go into that because, again, this is YouTube.
But I do think that as part of the language partial of this, the people that did like Trump liked him because what he said about politics, about his policies, he kept his word. Exactly. And the words corresponded with reality to a much greater extent than we're like seeing from the Biden. Biden seems completely disconnected from what's actually going on.
He does. Well, I think that there's obviously some cognitive problems there. I don't think everybody understands that.
But when you hear Jen Psaki say that it was the Afghan thing was a success, we should consider it a success.
That's that's almost like, I mean, this is like agitprop. This is what they call, this is Soviet style talk. And I think they can get away with it because, quite frankly, they have almost monopolistic control over the means of communication through big tech. I don't want to go too into that because we are lucky to even be here. But because of that, they feel they can pull that off. And I would just remind the liberal establishment that that's what really ultimately caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. And I think one of the big factors there, it's an interesting subject. It's one that we could look at from a lot of angles. But to my way of thinking, the final straw was the Chernobyl accident, in which a nuclear plant melted down and it sent a radioactive cloud across Europe. The Soviets denied that this had happened for several weeks. It isn't happening. This is false. When they were finally forced to admit it because of the world was screaming, they then blamed the United States and the West. And you're right that this was a conspiracy by the capitalist bourgeois, roadsters or whatever, And I think that at that point, the Russian people had just had enough. They were like, we're not going to take this crap. We've heard this for 50, 60, 70 years, these kind of lies. And it was so obviously false that was the final straw in terms of throwing out the Soviet system. Now, will that happen here? I mean, it would take a huge, huge lie. One of the things people liked about Trump was that he didn't lie about the big things. He might have embellished his own personal life a little, which was not good. I'm not defending that. He shouldn't have. But when it came to things like, like a Gulf of Tonkin resolution, or if you like your healthcare, you can keep your healthcare. You like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Those are big lies that can really hurt people. Trump never did that. Trump was honest about those things, and he took a lot of crap for being honest about it.
And when he embellished, I think most people that kind of liked Trump, and sort of people can't believe that people liked him because how could you overlook he's embellishing? He's an egomaniac. That most people understand. They knew that. That was part of they thought it was funny.
It's kind of thing like when you're at the Thanksgiving dinner, you brag about the size of the fish you caught on your vacation.
Yeah. I mean, it was the biggest fish in the world.
And like, I don't really think, I'm not saying that's good, but that's like, it's just and it's not even necessary for him because he has accomplished so much in his life. I don't know why he needed to do that, but whatever. It worked for him. It wasn't the end of the world. These were personal questions. The big lies, the public lies, the political lies, that didn't happen under Trump.
No, it didn't. And when you start
now it's happening.
Afghans,
they're telling us that, one of the most despicable aspects of the Afghanistan disaster is that they're telling us that it's the fault of the Americans.
I saw that too. It's their fault.
They've decided not to leave. Really? I mean, can you show me a person who decides they want to stay? I mean, that is a big, big lie. And that's very, very ugly and very bad.
Oh, yeah. And it makes it, the whole thing is such a debacle. I don't think there is any conspiracy by the Kabul thing. That's just an implosion of incompetence. What do you were taking the soldiers out, the military out before the civilians. That's smart.
Terrible. And, they're trying to blame Trump, which didn't work because this wouldn't have happened if Trump were president.
It's
Yeah,
pretty
they
low
would
when
have.
you blame the people that are still stuck there. It's
I mean, I'm
pretty
sure we
low.
would have withdrawn and probably we should have withdrawn, but
Mhm.
it would have been done. They would have had everybody out before they mentioned they were withdrawing. Then they would have pulled out orderly and, the hell with it. But not like this. This was
I,
just,
I think that there's some room here now, since the extreme actions of the Biden administration, not just that, but others as well. I'm sure you heard Bill Maher come out the other day, and he was just calling crap on it. He's going, this is all, but he said, I didn't want the shot. I took it for the team, but now I'm going to have to take a booster shot, and 10, who knows where this ends. And he's pretty to the left, but we can find common ground amongst us because, we want things to make sense. I think really that's all people want, is they want things to make sense, and they don't right now. They haven't for a while. The reaction. I won't go. This is just my personal opinion, so it's not. I'm not saying asking anybody to do anything or anything. But the reaction to the COVID thing was a little bit overkill, in my opinion. If you really look at the data and the actual death rates. I mean,
you
people
could
do
take a
die.
look.
I'm not trivializing
I
that,
mean,
but
again, let's be careful here because we're still on YouTube. But I wonder what, I mean, how did things work out in Sweden? There's a country that did not do any lockdowns. They didn't even bother with social distancing or masks. I don't know if it was any worse or better there. I don't think it was one of the worst places. I think it was probably somewhere in the middle. It is a virus and people did get sick and die, but I understand they protected their vulnerable. They protected their elderly. They protected their nursing homes, which is the moral thing to do, which probably should have been done, obviously should have been done by people like Cuomo and others. And, so they didn't have this big spike in numbers of deaths because those are the people that are more likely to die from this terrible virus, not healthy people. And
this
also,
this
it's interesting, take a look at a country like Nigeria. Nigeria has a population of something like 50 million people. It's the biggest, most populous country in Africa. They have a very tiny amount of virus. They don't have vaccines. They don't do social distancing. They're fine. Why is that? Why? I mean, I don't know the answer to this question, and maybe we shouldn't answer it. We'll just let it sit out there. But
I think that's
there is something going on with this whole rotten thing. I don't know if we want to go too deep into this again, because we are living in a time of political censorship. And even to speculate on some of these things is verboten. So,
let me
we
get
have
it
to,
back.
work around the edges and let people use their own common sense and logic to think about it.
Okay, you just hit on an important thing. I think I'll go back to the language and the whole relativism thing. Things don't make sense when everything's relative. Remember, the Western tradition from the get-go believes in logos. The Greeks, the logos is this the universe. Guess what? It makes sense. It's got an underlying principle that holds it together, and we don't make it up. It's called as you go down the line, it's called natural law. There's natural law holds the universe together, basically, and we don't make it up. But when we decide that we are all gods, it's the most extreme form of idolatry that you could ever conceive of, where every little individual is running around thinking they're a god, and you can't call them out on it, or you're right, you get canceled, basically, because you've offended them, you've offended their godhood. But then everything becomes relative, and where everything is game, nothing's going to make sense. And I don't know. I go back and forth. Sometimes I think of a grand conspiracy. Sometimes I think of a complete incompetence, just a cultural incompetence, because we promote mediocrity and relativism in idolatry of human beings. Each individual is this unique. Now remember, I'm purely for individualism. I'm a big, hard individual guy. I like individuals, but I like it under the SCOTUS, the John Duns Scotus idea of where individuals playing in the realm of truth. Truth is bigger than we are. We have to kind of try to figure out what it is.
It's kind of neat, it's what the Torah tells us, what the Bible tells us about the great villain of the entire epic, which is idol worship. This is neo-paganism, it's neo-idol worship, because the idol, we should recall, was a false god. It was not God. There's only one God, no other God before God. The idol was created by people. The idol was man-made. It was a graven image that would turn, it was put in a place that would take people's attention, draw people's attention toward it. And the idol would ask for things or demand things. But obviously, since the idol was not real, those things were being demanded by people. And those people were the people that were in control. They were the elites of their day. They were the pharaohs. They were the, the god kings that would basically run the idol behind the scenes. They would pull the strings to make the idol say this and that, throw your daughter into a burning volcano once a year, So, this was, because there is no God in that world, that God is man-made, the elite group becomes God. They take over the powers, because I think it was G.K. Chesterton who said that if you don't have God, then you have nothing, and therefore you have to create something. I'm not paraphrasing. But so, without a God, people were looking to some locus of reality, some logos, if you will, some form of reason in the universe. And without a divine God that created the universe separate and that's not manipulatable by people, you had this center of God belief, alleged small g, that was run by people. And that is the great sin of the entire Torah. That is the great temptation of the entire Torah, that the children of Israel were attracted to this idea because it's very alluring. You can be like God. You can control your own life and destiny. You could live forever. You could have, eternal powers. You can make things up any way you want. If you say something is true, it's true. I mean, it's an extremely intoxicating idea. And so they have replaced the idol with their own secretive societies, frankly. Now, again, I'm not condemning all secrecy or secret societies. Secrecy is part of life. We have secrecy between, the priest and the parishioner. You have secrecy between the lawyer and the client, right? You can't do everything out in the open. Families have a right to have a certain degree of privacy. Secrecy itself as an institution isn't the question. The question is that it is used and manipulated in an evil way by people who are seeking to subvert and control others in a way that is deceptive and that's dishonest.
It's a welcome to the Wizard of Oz to a certain extent, and so the idol has become man in a cynical fashion, where the power goes to the elite, but each of the individuals out here thinks that their version of the truth is the truth. But what kind of truths are available? I mean, even the individual is under attack. If you look at this through the lens of CRT and things like that, because there are no individuals. You're part of a group. You have to identify with a group of people. You never just get to say, I'm a human being. I'm a unique human being in the world, contributing to the common good the best I know how. You don't get that anymore. You have to belong to, I'm no matter what I do, I'm a white guy, I can't escape that. It's an accidental thing of the universe, but I'm prisoner to accidents rather than to any sort of essence or things like that. So it looks pretty bad right now, at least for my lens, it does. But things can only get better. I think that we have our ingrained bad tendencies where idolatry, you're right, it is intoxicating, and people know how to use it to intoxicate people almost into a brainwashed state where they'll just follow them around like automatons. On the other hand, humans also have an innate sense of we're rational beings. We can be. I don't say we're a lot of us are not rational most of the time, and everybody gets irrational once in a while. But at bottom, we have a tendency towards rational thinking, and we have a tendency towards God. I mean, that's the Catholic tradition, and I think the Jewish tradition as well. We have a natural tendency towards God.
Toward glorifying God. I mean, that's the whole Jewish mission, glorifying God, knowing God, and being an example for others to know God, and thus being sovereign citizens under God, and, limited in our capacity, but yet knowing knowing logos, knowing what's right and wrong, knowing the moral and ethical code of the Torah, which is the logos that started at creation. So, to wrap it up, I mean, there's a Talmudic expression that a little bit of light can dispel a lot of darkness.
Mhm.
And that's what we have to do. I mean, as people who can understand truths, that's what you and I try to do with our writing and with our podcasting. We can wake people up. I mean, I do believe, I know that I keep hearing, I don't know if you listen to Steve Bannon,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
War Room Pandemic. Excellent. I try to catch that as much as I can. He talks about agency and he talks about the Great Awakening. He's right. We have agency. We have the ability to do. We can take actions to help people wake up, and that there is all over the world a Great Awakening that kind of is an interesting counterpoise to woke,
Yeah, I
which is
think it is.
which is the opposite. It's a great somnambulance.
And it's hopeful, which we need some of that right now. One last ingredient that we have to throw into this mix. Humans are rational, but it comes with a burden. That's a huge burden because we have to choose between good and evil. That's up to us. That's why we have freedom, and it's a mixed bag. We have to train ourselves to go for the good, because we're always trying to be distracted by is always trying to distract us. But I definitely agree with you. That's in the Christian tradition as well. The light isn't meant to be under the bushel basket. It's meant to show. And there's plenty of us out there, I think, but we don't control the airwaves. So we have to just do it the old fashioned way.
We have to do it in any way we can. People can always make a contribution. And for starters, there's evil everywhere. Satan is everywhere, within and without. But we have to, for starters, as a basic, identify the nature of that, know what's good, know what's evil. If we then do something on the evil side, at least know that you are. Don't pretend. It's like, don't redefine, the people who are involved in evil want to tell us that what they're doing is good.
Mm-hmm.
They want to inverse reality. If they're going to be evil, but of course they won't do it out in the front because they'll be stopped. That's why they're secretive. But for starters, as average people, we're operating in the world, we have to learn to identify good and evil when we see it and when we know it, and we have to tell ourselves what it is. And one of the ways to get to that is through prayer.
It is. And you have to watch out for relativism, because the easy target here is, I used to tell this to students all the time. Do you think Hitler thought he was doing evil?
He convinced himself that it was good.
He convinced himself that it was good, even though to know good and evil, you have to bow down to God. You have to realize that you don't create it. It's a choice you make, not a creation that you get to designate this as good and evil. You have to discern it. There's a discernment process here, and it comes through prayer. I agree a great deal with that, and it also comes through community. One thing that conservative types aren't real good at, we are sort of individualistic. I think we're naturally that way, and the other side is very well organized. We could do a little bit of work on getting a little bit more organized into a community of individuals.
We can be counter Fabians.
Yes.
We can basically, it's just, it only takes one woke person to change an entire institution.
Yep.
And we have to, because everyone else kind of averts their eyes. They're like, I don't want to see this. You have to see it and stand up and get with other people and say, no, we don't accept this. So anyways, Jack, let my listeners and viewers know where they can read your book, your work, your blog, whatever websites you'd like to impart.
Yeah, you can get to my blog on revivalwriting.com, and I just started a Getter account at Revival Writing,
Mm-hmm.
and my articles are all over. You can just search for them on the internet. I'm working on a book. I should be done with it. I'm thinking in about maybe 2.5 to 3 months.
Good.
And that'll I've been working on it for a while, so I'm pretty excited about that. And that's about it. I am open now, since I'm free from academia. I'm writing. If anybody wants to collaborate writing or anything like that, you can get a hold of me through the website as well, revivalwriting.com.
Right. You also are a good instructor in terms of how to write. So
I am. I have a lot of experience there, and I didn't leave the academy because of the students, but let me make that clear. I liked the student. I really enjoyed the students, most of them, almost all of them. They were pretty good. It was the other forces. Where I was being a conservative on that campus was just too much. After a while, I was distracted. I couldn't think anymore. I was depressed, so I left.
You and a lot of people, that's the culture. I mean, people say it doesn't matter that academia has gone so far left, but it does matter.
It does. It
To
does.
take it back. I mean, they've been very Fabian, if you will, in terms of how they've taken over academia. They look at the very long lens, by decades. They gradually, through attrition, they weed out people and they work their friends up the route line until eventually 10 years later, they've taken over. Anyways, so John, listen, I want to thank you as always.
Thank you for having me. I always enjoy our conversations.
We'll do it again soon. All right. And keep me posted on your book.